Mr. Smith will not be present today. Let me go through the agenda, colleagues, and if we can cover several consent items. Items 8 and 9 are litigation account summaries. If we have no questions as it relates to the individual cases, we can move both of those on consent. On 8 or 9, you have no cases on questions on individual?
Yeah.
Paul? Okay, we'll move 8 and 9 on consent. I would just like to ensure that the committee report, let me make sure I got the right one. Yes, the committee report on number 8 reflect that, if I read it correctly, that we've exhausted a good portion of this year's funding of the $32 million, or the $42 million that, I'll take it back, the $32 million that's in play. We've spent over $20 million in the first month and a half. Much of that has been cases that we pushed from the 08-09 budget into this fiscal year. And so we should reflect those numbers. It's roughly, we started with $42 million. We spent over $22 million, but just so that it's reflected that this year, due to the movement of cases from 08-09, that's taken up a good portion of this year's allocation. So we're well on our way to exhausting the funds within the first month and a half. The next item asks for, first of all, a continuance on number 10 requested by Mr. Weezar, and that's an item in his district, so we'll hold that for 1 week. And then if we can also consent item on number 12. There's no concerns about number 12. And also consent item on number 13. Deals with a surplus.
How's that horse going?
Yeah. And then if we could consent 14 through 19, which are Office of Finance, 6 Office of Finance waiver requests on penalties. These are pretty well have already been negotiated. Also, it saves us some interest in not delaying these any further. The other thing, just for the committee to know, that we're working in the claims board with the general manager of Department of Finance to come up with new waiver and new interest policies that we'll be bringing to this committee to give some a better dollar value to the city of LA. So if we can make a movement on those items, then we can go into closed session on items 1, 2, and 3, and then we can come back with the remaining regular agenda.
So moved.
Okay, so we're going to go in the back and do the closed session items, and then we'll come back for the regular agenda of those items that are remaining.
Okay. And that's for 1, 2, and 3, closed session?
Ron Caboni. He's called me twice this morning. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think this is it. We got what they use for these departments, these top 10, was the CAO, the city attorney's report. So what was that, the number 95? Yep. Good. Okay, we're going to reconvene the regular meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. Before we go to the item, we have one public comment card. We'd ask Mr. Israel to come up and make your comments. You have 2 minutes. Is Israel still here? Okay. Why don't we go into the next item?
Okay. All right, I think the next item is number 4, but I think we have some folks that want to stop by. Let's go to item 7 if we can. This is the CA report relative to authorization for a resolution authority within Bureau of Street Services for one risk manager, one for the period ending June 30th, 2009.
This is Mark Talai, Office of the CAO. The report before you, dated March 16th, was a request for a risk manager position in the 08-09 budget. It has subsequently been included in the 9-10 budget as a risk manager too.
Let me just ask, I believe one of the instructions during the budget process was to move all new positions to the UB. And so we need, would be the accurate instruction for this report as to the movement of that position?
That would be to release the position so we could go before managed hiring to fill it. The funding is still currently in the 9-10 budget, so no transfer of funds would need to happen.
Okay, but is it still in the UB?
The funds are not in the UB, they are in the adopted budget, but the position has not been filled, awaiting release of the
So
position.
the money is in the department budget?
That's correct.
Okay, and so basically, this approval is to just get it before the managed hiring?
It's pending before managed hiring if you release the position authority.
All right. Then what is the conflict with our prior instruction of moving them all to the UB? Is that still effective? Or I think that was one of our directions at all new positions.
That was one of the directions. This position, actually, there was a trade. I believe the Bureau gave up 3 positions for this, and so I think that's how this one perhaps slipped out of what I'll call the normal, moving positions to the UB.
Okay, so the position is in the department.
It's in the department.
Okay, and
The funds and the position are in the department.
Okay, so both in the department, and you're just looking for authority to go to managed hiring.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Okay, any questions?
No questions from me.
Paul? Okay, let me just ask, as an addition, we asked, as we dealt with all of these liability issues in the budget for the CAO, and I think our notes are correct, budget instruction 95 asked the CAO and CLA to work together on the top 10 departments that the city attorney had identified as being responsible for the largest amount of liability. Like a report back in around, I guess, February of next year, to where we can get the first 6 months of evaluation as to what progress we're making and on citywide, but specifically those top 10 departments. Okay, so we'll move that item.
Okay. Yeah, and actually on this is a note and file at this point.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, we'll notify, but we'll just have that one instruction for that
Okay.
report back.
okay. Okay, with that, I believe, let's go to item number 11, if we can. This is the CA report, communication from the mayor, in motion, Weiss Gruel, relative to an application to the State Office Homeland Security for the 2007-8 Regional Catastrophic Preparedness Grant Program for an award of $6 million.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Melissa Fleming with the CAO. As stated, this particular grant, the mayor's office is asking authority to accept the 2007-2008 RCPGP. It provides a total of $6 million to the city and 10 Los Angeles, Long Beach, Riverside urban area partner jurisdictions. The grant requires a 25% cost share, which is equivalent to a $2 million cash or in-kind match, which will be provided by all 11 jurisdictions in an equivalent proportion to their grant award allocation.
How much is the match?
Excuse me?
How much is the match?
The total match is $2 million. However, since the funds are provided to the city as well as the other jurisdictions, the city's portion of that match is $862,511.
And the CAO is recommending that we're going to fund this to keep current positions on the payroll, but you're recommending not to backfill.
That's correct. There are a total of, I believe, 9 positions that have current resolution authorities, 4 in the Emergency Management Department and 5 in the Fire Department. So those positions, this grant provides the funding for those positions that are currently in existence.
Okay, now where would the backfill would have occurred? Is that in the fire?
So that's correct. There are a total of, we're looking at 13 positions for this grant. 9 are resolution authority and 4, as it is in its current structure, are existing positions. Those would be actually in the Los Angeles Police Department. So those 4 LAPD positions would be the one at this time that they would not backfill or discontinue the backfill of those 4 positions in order to achieve general fund savings in order to help the city meet the match for this grant.
And then the 9 resos would be, what, the fire department?
The 9 resos, 4 are in EMD and 5 are in the Fire Department. And those are existing resos. They were continued in the Personnel Authority resolution this year.
Okay, so the only positions not being backfilled are the 4.
Correct. In the original CAO report, we discussed a total of 6 positions, 2 in fire and 4 in the police department. When we came to Personnel Committee, we discussed that the departments had reached an agreement that the fire department would no longer dedicate any additional positions to this grant. So there are a total right now of 4 resos in EMD, 5 resos in fire, and 4 existing LAPD positions. The fire department will not be providing any existing positions.
And then again, with this grant, then with those positions being funded, none of them will be backfilled.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any questions?
No, it's great. Thank you.
Oh,
No, I think they should grab the funding and run.
okay. We'll move that item.
Okay. I believe the controller's here. If we can go to item number 6, which is the controller's report relative to budgetary cash flow.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Fine.
I do like to tease that I don't miss the long council meetings, but I do miss Budget Committee.
We miss you too on budget.
Thank you.
We know
Bernard
you're
didn't jump yet to say that.
We know you're on council phone. We hear when you plug in. And
Oh, you did? Yeah. Every once in a while. And of course, I'm here with Bill, who I know can answer many questions. We sent a letter, which is something we have been doing since July 1st and even before, but particularly this has taken on greater interest and importance, and I know Mr. Parks, this committee, even prior to me going over, we talked about the importance of these cash flow letters coming on a regular basis as often as possible. And so we wanted to keep our commitment to providing you with the city's cash flow issues, and particularly those related to salaries, which is the largest component of the city's budget. And although we have made some progress in not spending as much money over our budget, we are still at this point biweekly salary should average about $103.9 million throughout the year, and actual payments have been above that. And we have indicated that even in our last letter, that if no changes were made, we would exceed the salary budget by $200 to $250 million, roughly $54 million less than our September letter on this subject. And so our point is that the Friday, of course, the coalition adopted the ERIP, and that will have some impact clearly going forward, and that we will continue. I think Bill discussed this morning that probably 5 weeks from now, is that what we think? 5 weeks from now, we'll be able to provide to you the savings directly in relation to the reduction in the hours for those coalition to the 76.5, and we'll be able to tell you how much savings, as we have in with the EAA contract and the furloughs, which has been about $2 million per pay period in our ability to try to reduce the deficit. And I think that we have stated consistently to keep our reserve fund as strong as we can within that budget and revenue, that and we went into a little bit more detail in this letter about the importance of the reserve fund and why it is important to have that reserve fund going forward, both for bonding interests as well as a lot of challenges could still face us in this year, and to expend or to draw down on that reserve fund currently would not be the best way in which to balance our budget. And so we think going forward we're going to still have some challenging years. So we hope that this would just be a little bit of a update. Bill, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add, but we have included the salary expenditure projections based on the last pay periods.
The only thing I would add is that that is the payday for September 23rd. Since then, we've had 2 additional paydays. We've completed a 3rd pay period, so that 49 million is probably closer to 75 million right now.
That's not good news. Let me just say on the report, we really appreciate it because I think it creates the urgency that we felt maybe wasn't there a few months ago. It's just where we are. And I think the fact that when you put it in the terminology that showing exactly what we're overspending per pay period makes it real dollars, and people start projecting somewhere around April or May that we could, if we keep going as we are, we will run out of tin cans to find out in the backyard and things like that. The one thing I'd like to see if you could add one little piece of information. We went back and found the first report. If there's a way to give us a continuum, as opposed to the reports stand on their own, but if there's a way, I think you commented in this report and said I guess we're spending at a lesser rate, not a great deal, but we're spending. It's kind of like when Ed Davis used to count crime, he said it's increasing at a decreasing rate. And so the issue is that we just need to see on that continuum would be helpful as these reports come in, because when they stand alone, they certainly are urgent, but when you see from
the progression
report, it would be very helpful to see that.
And I think in the last sentence of our memo too, it did say that increased it from 67 million from the 49.7, and as Bill even going higher than that. So we'll work with your staff and see if there's some kind of formats that would be helpful to have that continuum going forward. And we did use, and you all did, I think, Mr. Parks particularly, in that first report we came out, which said every day we don't act is $1 million, and I think that became the mantra. And when we can be helpful in providing the factual data and working with the CAO, we are more than willing to do that.
I think your last paragraph hits the point, because there's a lot of energy going on, but it's not correlating into saving money. And I think the fact that all this energy and all this effort, when it's all over, your deficit is moved from 40-some to 60-some, basically says the urgency is still there. And so that's
correct.
The kind of thing we need to stay focused on.
Correct. And we hope with in 5 weeks from now, letting you know what the reduction in, because this includes the COLAs not being implemented currently. It also, in the future, will be the reduction in the hourly, and then it will be when people go off the payroll. And we'll see how quickly, because the 45 days, if you adopt on Friday, I believe it is, the 45 days starts from there. And so we'll also be able to give you some data on that as well going forward.
We appreciate what you did, and also my Pacific Palisades constituents appreciated your presentation last week. You gave them some lay people's insight into how things are done in the controller's office, and I'm very grateful for that. I have a problem with this whole EAA business. In my opinion, I got sort of confronted by some EAA people the other day, pretty upset. And I'm upset because furloughs in that area there is a disaster on planning, public safety, and in the sense of Department of Transportation. I know that isn't your horse to talk about, but do you have any thoughts about EAA and where it is in your mindset?
Well, I just think, it is in the negotiations. I'm not sure Miguel may be able to provide you with the greatest update on where they are with the negotiations, but as a general manager, as well as part of our department, we have 63% of our staff. I think it's 63, right? Is that 63 or 67? All of a sudden, I'm forgetting which one. Still, a large percentage of our staff are EAA members as well and are furloughed. And so that does, we've had to make changes within our operational structure to address that, as I'm sure other departments like planning and like DOT who have a large number of EAA members. So it's our hope that
I know we
it's
get a
forward.
saving, but I don't think it's a real saving for us because they have the multiplier effect on a lot of other issues that are important to us. This is not the appropriate time, but would you come up, Miguel, for one quick second and give us an update on where we are with EAA?
I don't think I could discuss our status
I
and
understand.
negotiations here, but, with EAA, they actually do represent $34 million worth of savings. And obviously, in the context of $405 million, that is a significant contribution. In talking to many departments, I think many departments, the way they've been handling, I don't know if that's the case in the controller's office, is that for those who are on a fixed schedule where they get every other Friday off, they essentially haven't been paid for that Friday. So in terms of the work itself, it really hasn't had a significant impact because they weren't coming in that Friday anyway. Now, obviously, that hit does impact people in their pocketbook, and I assume the individuals who approached you probably were upset about how significant of an impact that is for them and their families. There's no doubt that that's real. And as we end up finding more and more ways to mitigate the shortfall, the reality is that we're going to have more of these kinds of situations. With the coalition agreement, if you recall, there's 3.5 hours in each pay period that they're going to have to take. That certainly is an impact in their pocketbook. It's also a logistical nightmare for those of us who have to manage an office that has EAA, non-reps, coalition members, but it's a reality of what we're facing. So I certainly could appreciate the concerns. I just don't know what other solutions we have at this point. I was approached, I could say that I was approached by the leadership of EAA, and I'm hopeful that at some point we could sit down and begin negotiations.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So have you had meetings yet, formal or informal, to try and kickstart that again?
Again, I'm reluctant to talk about what we're negotiating outside of ERC, but I can say that I have had a conversation with them, and the way we left it is that they were going to approach me once they were ready, again, to have a follow-up meeting. So the ball's in their court to approach our office.
Okay. Let me just ask on this item, because it would be good for Friday when we have these other items, number 4, is this going to be
We'll just need to request a placeholder.
places? We'd have this Friday when we're dealing with item 4, which is the larger financial issue, so we could have them all on the same day.
Okay. Either Bill or I or both will be available if need be to do that. And I know that with our EA members too, a lot of them are accountants, so it does have an impact on our ability to operate like the other departments as well. But
I think the last time we tried to coordinate this, we never got around to it
That's
because
right.
the whole day went haywire.
you all went back in executive session for hours, so that was a day I was glad I was on the other side.
So we'll try to get this for Friday so that we can deal with it as a package.
Thank you. And if there are other, again, our plan for the next couple of months will be to provide you with the cash flow analysis related to the reduction in hours for the coalition, and then subsequent will be, and working with the CAO, will be the impact on the cash flow based on the early retirement and the number of employees that are no longer on the payroll and how much money, in essence, it is hard to say savings because we are impacting services in Los Angeles, but it is about financial. It's about $2 million every pay period related to EAA taking the furlough days.
One thing I talked to Miguel this morning about, and I think we all have to keep in mind, these are like stepping stones, and one of the major stepping stones is, December. If we don't get enough people to retire, then we're kind of back to square one. And so we can make all these arrangements and thoughts about how we're going to save, but there's some things well out of our control that could cause us to go back to square one, and now puts us in a more urgent situation where we now have 6 months to deal with 12 months of work, and the tools become less and less in the sense of what we have available. So we're still, like I said, we can make these decisions on Friday, but there's other things in the works that will.
Well, and Miguel and I have had conversations as well about the importance of being ready for Monday. And all of our departments, from lacers to CAO to personnel to controller's office, being ready to process as quickly as possible, because the sooner we can process, the sooner the employees are off payroll, and the savings will be greater. So we're part of that team where we can be helpful to do that.
I mean, it should be noted that the controller and I meet weekly, where we discuss a number of issues, primary sort of the status of our funding, and we're coordinating our communications to the council and to the mayor. It's important that you get one message from your financial advisors, and we work well together in that regard.
Yeah.
Just one sidebar on early retirement. Are we being sensitive to the fact that there's some folks that are needed for the mission here that maybe fit technically into early retirement criteria, but could impact the city in a way that we might not like? Do we have that kind of flexibility in that context or not?
Well, we do, from the standpoint that our agreement allows management to determine when in the fiscal year someone could actually retire. And so the way we're organizing that work is that we're asking each manager to look at those individuals who are eligible for ERIP and divide them up into 3 different phases. So for those individuals who are the most critical in terms of the function that they do, and who are the hardest to replace, a manager would put that individual at the final phase of the early retirement program so that they could take advantage of their time as part of the city family, as well as work on training someone to do their work. So that was an important component of the early retirement program from the management standpoint, because obviously if we lose everyone overnight, it would obviously create a real problem. We've also convened in my office a group that we affectionately call the brain drain group, made up of general managers from some of the larger departments as well as a handful of small departments. We meet every other week, and they've essentially helped us in figuring out how to best develop a set of instructions that recognize exactly what you said. It was from that group that we came up with the phase idea. We're also expanding the responsibilities of that group and making sure that we're addressing as many issues as possible. So whenever there's a communication that comes from my office, it's sort of already been vetted by some of our seasoned department heads and includes their perspective. So that's been very helpful in this process as well.
And when we go through these 3 steps, which I certainly appreciate the way you've addressed it, how many folks ultimately are we talking about leaving the family?
Well, the ERIP limits the total number of retirees to 2,400. And we already have 400 individuals who, by having those who have already submitted for retirement or have retired, by default become part of the ERIP class, if you will.
Yeah.
So the number of slots that are available right now are a little over 2,000. So they're being filled up quickly. On average, we lose about 500 individuals to retirement on an annual basis. So the fact that we're already at 400 and it's not even November says something significant. And so we're hopeful that because we need those savings, that we're going to have all of those slots actually filled by our workforce.
Will you give us updates on a rather
Absolutely.
timely basis so we know how it's flowing?
Absolutely. We plan to give monthly updates as to where we're at. The filing period will begin next Monday. We're putting a website on one up that's being managed by my office that will allow people to apply online, so they don't even have to walk into an office. They could simply apply online. It's going to have a calculator that's going to tell them, once they fill in the appropriate number, tell them what the benefit is for them. And then once they apply to ERIP, then they go to lasers for the actual specifics on their what they're eligible for. We're working closely with Sally and her team to making sure that we have a consistent message. We're also developing a phone center or a call center using our 311 system, so if folks have questions, they could call and speak to an individual who could ask basic questions about how ERIP operates, and working closely with the coalition as well as lasers and the mayor's office on that.
So basically what happens is this will go before the council for final ratification, and then
on Friday.
And then Monday, you'll already have the system up and
Right.
people can...
Exactly. We're going to have sort of seminars where people could come in and learn about the program. We're also going to have space in our office where folks could actually, if they don't have access to a computer, where they could actually work online and fill out the application. We'll have folks walking around helping them fill out the application and so forth. So we're trying to run this like a campaign. You know, instead of 2,400 AVs, we have 2,400 retirees that we're looking for, and so.
And what's your time sense with the kind of, what I think is very impressive outreach that you're going to do for all 2,400?
We're doing a mass email to, we know who's eligible, so we're doing a mass email to, we're going to have a weekly newsletter sort of informing folks of any new developments to the program, how many days are left. We're also going to work with the coalition to highlight individuals who have chosen to do this and why, so to sort of personalize it a bit. So the time frame is, you know, obviously very short. The window is between next Monday and the 16th of December. So we're guessing that we're going to see a large number of folks at the beginning, and then we're going to slow down a little bit, then a big influx again towards the end as we're reaching the deadline.
Thank you.
Sure.
No additional questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you on Friday. Next item. We'll note and file that report.
Okay, do you want to take item 4? Did anything, we should take up item 4, because I think we had, yeah. So item 4 is basically the CAO and CLA report with updated operational plans and continued consideration of the Budget and Finance Committee minority report recommendations.
Sure.
Well, as you know, as we talked about, the ERIP was ratified by the Coalition of Unions last Friday, and is before your council for the final ordinance adoption this Friday. In addition to that, we received a ratification from the PPL. Combined, those two labor agreements represent nearly $200 million worth of savings for the city of Los Angeles for this fiscal year, and additional savings for next year and the following years. This is a major component to our strategy to reduce our $405 million deficit. That's combined with those furloughs that have already been taking place with EAA and a number of different other initiatives. We remain still outstanding. We have a few civilian unions we need to wrap up negotiations with. We need to wrap up negotiations with our non-represented employees, or just decide how we're proceeding with that. We're still maintaining conversation with UFLAC and EAA. So while it's a major step forward, it's important to note that we still have a significant problem before us that we need to be very vigilant about. So what we're proposing is maintaining a very close watch on all the elements of these agreements. There are parts of the coalition agreement that happen automatically, like the deferment of the COLAs and the deferment of the cash payouts. But there are others that are going to need some more vigilance, particularly as it relates to overtime, the reduction of cash overtime, which is projected at $22 million for this fiscal year as well. And so we want to report regularly to this committee and on the extent to which departments are effective in meeting that. We also are concerned about department's ability to maintain the reduced schedule of 3.5 hours per pay period. It's just having walked through that in my own office, it's going to be a little bit of a logistical nightmare, but it's something that's necessary to do, and we would like to report regularly to this committee so that you could keep close tabs on that. As it relates to PPL, overtime is the most significant savings of $45 million. If you recall, in that agreement, essentially officers who work overtime currently under 96 hours get cash after those 96. That has been changed to 400 hours. So we want to make sure we keep a close tab on how overtime is used. But we're optimistic, having worked closely with the department in establishing these numbers, that we'll be able to get there. But we needed to keep close tabs on those things. As it relates to the operational plans before you, I would recommend that no action be taken today, pending approval from your council on Friday. But however, I do also recommend that there be some kind of movement to proceed forward on the remainder of our deficit. In our plan, we have identified about $9 million of targeted solutions, which basically equivalent of 251 positions, elimination of. We believe we should start moving forward on that and directing departments to develop operational plans for those specific areas, and would like to report to you so that once we know how many people have actually participated in the ERIP program and the dust has settled, your council could take swift action to address the remainder of our shortfall. And so, as the controller indicated, this is not a time to rest on our laurels. We really need to move aggressively forward so that we could ensure that we eliminate our deficit as soon as possible. So having said that, I would recommend that this committee be sort of the principal point of engagement when it comes to the monitoring of this plan, and report to the council as new activities are required.
Thank you very much. Let me just, for clarity, we have had these two reports back and forth, the minority reports, and there's several items outstanding, and so your recommendation is we move those to the council with specific instructions, and then you're going to add some additional instructions for the committee report, which the clerk has. Has the other committee members received the additional? Okay. And then, Lynn, while we're doing that, there's a CLA, you made up our committee notes, but have you reviewed the recommendations from the CAO regarding the additional issues?
We just received these just a short time before the committee meeting, and we are in agreement in concept. However, if your committee wishes for the CLA to continue to participate, then I would suggest that what's been presented to you be amended to include the CLA and also reporting back on these recommendations.
Okay, is there a specific line item or just added?
More or less wherever you see the CAO,
right.
We'd be happy to
We'll do
report
that.
back if that's what you'd like.
Very good.
That's fine. We welcome our partnership with the CLA's office.
And so, Lorraine, you have that copy wherever on that document, wherever we have the directing the CAO, we should put a line and also add the CLA as part of that report back.
I think this is great. I look forward to that Friday. Just, I know you're in negotiations with the fire department. When we look at some of those issues, I must tell you that I had a community meeting in the Palisades, that when we were done, people were uncomfortable, to put it mildly. And in my conversations with the chief, we talked a little bit about that issue. Where do you see us at this point with that department, and if there anything you can share with us, this committee?
Well, the bulk of the savings in the fire department come from the modified staffing plan. It's approximately $40 million that we've been aggressively generating for this fiscal year, a significant component to this overall solution. We are in impasse with UFLAC, but we are in mediation with them. We had one discussion through a mediator last week, and we hope to have one again this week. And so I'm hopeful that we could reach some kind of closure to this issue, so that we could move forward on closing this particular agreement with UFLAC.
So does that mean that some of the brownouts could be eliminated as part of that discussion?
Well, I mean, again, the brownouts are really separate and apart from the negotiations that we're having, similar to the agreement with PPL. You know, the brownouts are really at the discretion of management. And so,
but if they give us a favorable deal in negotiations, some of those savings could be applied to restoring service.
Let me just, I think EERC tomorrow
yes.
would probably be better, because we're stepping on his toes as it relates to his flexibility in dealing with it. But one thing I'd ask them, at least from the way we dealt with it, we talked about the managed movement of people, that we stay away from terms like brownout and closed stations, because it's really a deployment of something like 80-some people that
Right.
we have reassigned.
Right.
Because it gives an impression that we've closed service, when basically we are saving something like, out of the 200 positions per day of overtime, we're saving by putting people on straight time in those positions.
Right.
Yeah, I think that needs a little more clarity out there in some corners which don't appreciate that. Just for the public record here, and my concerns are when we have a red flag day, how are my people served in that period? And I've been in discussions with the chief about that, and I look forward to us in a different setting to talk more about that issue.
What time is the ERC tomorrow?
At 8 a.m.
8 a.m., so that would be the appropriate.
I'm not sure if this is a related question that also will get the same answer, which is come back tomorrow. Are we still looking at utilizing layoffs or needing to resolve our budget shortfall, or are we, with the deals that we've made now, appear that we can avoid that?
No, I don't think we can avoid it. I think the reality is that we still have a deficit, even with the agreements that have been closed so far, and the only options available to us are layoffs and furloughs. So we're not out of the woods as it relates to either one of those.
But it would only be a tool we could utilize with the bargaining units that we haven't come to agreement.
Well, we've agreed not to engage in any layoffs and furloughs with the coalition members, and no furloughs with PPL. So the remaining bargaining units are the only ones that we can actually engage in that kind of reduction.
Thank you.
Sure.
You may mention, I think Wendy mentioned the deficit is growing just in the last couple of weeks, and every pay period it grows. What is your sense of the dollars in the sense of revenue coming in? You projected about 75 million shortfall from July 1st to current. Is that leveling out, or is that getting bigger? Where are we on that?
We'll know better in January. That's sort of when we collect our receipts and start indicating, but obviously much of this is attached to the economy. there's talk about the recession being over. I don't quite feel it here in Los Angeles yet. I think that we're still I would be surprised if we don't see further reductions in our revenue, and we won't know that until the mid-year financial status report, which usually comes in late January, early February. So at that point in time, so it's very likely that we will be coming to you with a report that says that our deficit is larger than $405 million. Plus, we have to, at some point, we need to start dealing with next year's budget. Our office has been working closely with the mayor on that. And unfortunately, we anticipate next year's budget to be as bad, if not worse, than this year's budget. So the extent in which we mitigate some of the problems for next year are really dependent to which the solutions that we come up with this year can be carried over to next year. And so in both the labor agreements with the coalition as well as with PPL, there are elements that carry over to next year. For example, with our PPL agreement, what is this year a $60 million savings, next year will actually be $100 million. So that's actually going to go a long way in helping us address that. We also expect savings for next year under the coalition agreement. So, and to the extent that people participate in the ERIP program, obviously, and we don't backfill those positions, then that's going to help us for next year and the following years. So, I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm just not sure yet if it's an oncoming train or not. But I think that we're getting there. At least I see a light.
Okay, there's two questions I got. One is service to the constituent. When we go through the ERIP, we need to know when you do the month-to-month what impact that's going to have on services to the constituents as part of your report. So they clearly understand with the leaving of that person, it might impact some of the services they take for granted. And the second issue for me, and I applaud everybody's efforts, but the retirement plan and the whole notion of one's contribution to retirement and that notion of structural deficit, which candidly I've been talking about for 4 years here. We've made some progress, obviously, in what we've just done, but I think that is one that deserves a lot more understanding among the city family of the importance of dealing with that retirement issue.
I agree. There's a task force within my office that's looking at that very issue in terms of how do we start making major progress as it relates to our pension for the future. There aren't any easy answers. It's and the options are very few, but that is going to be the next major order of business and a major contributor to our deficit for next year. So we have to make some progress on that. I agree.
Any other questions? Okay. Let me just ask the CA so we can have a clear report from the clerk's office to the council. If you could work with our clerk to go through the recommendations for items 3, 4, 5, 6, and 15 from the previously approved September 29th council action, and also the new recommendations that were presented today, so that we could have a concise and clear report for council on Friday. If we can ensure we have a placeholder on Friday, we can move item 4.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That takes us to the last item, item 5. And this is our report and resolution relative to the sale of the city's Proposition 1A property tax receivables.
Okay.
Mario, yes?
Wait.
I was just going to introduce myself.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Mario Vasquez with the City Administrative Officer.
Okay. Let me just go through a couple of questions, and one of the things, just for the public record, just could you give us a little thumbnail of what Prop 1A is and what I know people voted on it and it's part of state law, but there's a lot of misunderstanding of what Prop A, when we use those kind of shorthand, as to what it really means and what its impact of the city is.
Okay, I'll read from the report, but Proposition 1A was passed by the California voters in 2004 to ensure that local property taxes and sales tax revenues would remain with local governments. However, that proposition could be suspended if the governor declared a fiscal emergency and two-thirds of the state legislature concurred. And in this past July, the legislature did pass an emergency suspension of Proposition 1A that was signed by the governor. And that emergency suspension allows the state during this fiscal year to borrow 8% of the amount of property tax revenues apportioned to cities, counties, and special districts. But also requires that the 8% be returned with interest 4 years from now by June 30th, 2013. And for the city, that 8% borrowing totals approximately $120 million.
Do we have any assessment at this time as to what impact it would make on the city based on what we are aware of the state's financial condition? Is there an assurance that these bonds can be floated and receive this revenue? Is there any new information about, because my last reading, the state was one step above junk bonds. How does that impact us if they're unable to sell these bonds?
I think the state's bond rating has moved up slightly from junk bond rating, but the state anticipates they will be able to sell these bonds so the cities and counties can get their 8%. 3 years ago, a similar borrowing was done, the vehicle license fee. And so at this point, we anticipate that the bond issuance will occur. And if it does occur and the committee and council do vote for the city to participate in that borrowing, then we would see the 8% borrowing return to the city in two segments, in January of 2010 and May 2010. If it's the council's pleasure not to participate in the program, the city would not receive the $120 million again until June 30th, 2013.
So that's if the city chooses not to.
Correct.
And then on this item, let me ask Lorraine, is this also one item that we're going to get before council on Friday?
If you'd like.
Okay, if we can do that, and then we have this whole package on Friday, if we get a place in it.
No questions, thank you.
Questions?
Okay, thank you very much.
That's it. That's the end of the agenda for today.
We have one public comment card, Mr. Israel, he's not here, so we'll put that on the record. Thank you, we're adjourned. Thanks.